A bruised purple rift tears open above a sea of lava. An enormous figure steps through, gauntlet clinking with warped netherite and blazing soul embers. The Nether exhales a new terror. Its fires do not burn him, they bend to his will. The world trembles as an overlord begins to write himself into the very bedrock of Minecraft. Below the rift, the Nether sea churns like a god made angry, its obsidian waves plating themselves with ash and sorrow as if the realm remembers an older and crueler justice. He walks with steps that men feel before they see, each footfall a tiny apocalypse, and the lava around him recoils, then swirls into crowns of molten gold beneath boots that should have burned long ago. The gauntlet on his hand is not mere tool but heirloom of conquest, netherite twisted into sigils that hum in the same key as the world's deep memory, and the soul embers along its knuckles whisper like stitched souls warning of covenant. From the rift pours a scent like iron rain and old battlefields. It carries with it fragments of foreign stars, and a hush that makes even the piglins bow their rough heads, uncertain whether to worship or to flee. In every bastion and brutiforce of the Nether there are legends, spoken in the haggard shrieks of ghasts and scrawled in obsidian by ancient blaze lords, of entities that could unmake a biome with a gesture. Yet none of those tales mention a being who could bend fire to servitude. The villagers whisper of an old mismatch of worlds, a bruise where realities overlap, and the rift is that bruise singing in the wrong key, calling a presence familiar in shape but alien in purpose. They name him in fragments: Tyrant, Overlord, Riftborn. They do not know the syllables that once tethered his name in other universes, only the hush that comes when the Nether remembers someone who can sign the bedrock with dominion. In the first hours of his arrival, the Nether's power collects like a crown around him, fortresses light with new flames that burn blue and black, and the piglins trade caution for supplication when he passes. Yet conquest is never only the work of a single hand, it is a cruelty measured in alliances forged, betrayals signed in the quiet corners of lavalit halls, and in the slow art of rewriting the loyalties of stone and beast. On the first night, a small band of adventurers stalks the edge of the newly corrupted valley. Torches held like prayers, they are crafted from courage, iron, and a stubborn insistence that the Overlord is not inevitable. There is Mara, once a builder of bridges in the end, now a scout, her crossbow singing with enchanted bolts. There is Kellen, whose diamond armor is cracked but whose voice rings like a bell. And there is little Sarai, who keeps a book of maps as if it were a relic. They creep among warped fungi and basalt deltas, listening as the Nether rearranges itself, the sounds of new fortifications being raised like the slow hammering of a giant making his throne. As they witness the concentration of power, Mara says in a voice low and brittle as obsidian, "There is something different. This is not a warlord, this is a law." Kellen answers with a curse, certain not yet of the shape of his fear, for there remains a stubbornness in the human spirit that names tyrants and then plots how to topple them. But the Overlord does not move like a general, he moves like a magnet, attracting the Nether's anomalies into concentric rings of authority. Blazes assemble into citadels of iron, ghasts tether themselves with black chains, and Endermen hesitate as if summoned to bear witness. At the heart of his domain, the bastion of Tenebris rises, stitched by flames and fate, its spires like broken teeth, and its banners woven from the hair of nightmares. Here he shapes policy into stone. From the bastion, he speaks in tones that ripple through basalt and bone, and even the lava seems to listen, falling into channels like obedient rivers to irrigate the foundations of his rule. The adventurers watch this from a shattered ridge and speak little they understand that where the Overlord touches the world, its rules begin to rewrite, and even their enchantments hum out of tune. Sarai unfurls his maps, ancient papyrus crawling with new ink as if someone unseen draws borders and claims upon them. His fingers tremble and he murmurs. He is making biomes swear allegiance. In reply, a shadow moves in the air above them, shaped like a hand turning a page. A voice that might be memory, or the gauntlet itself declares that all things are better when ordered, and that order is his to grant. They make camp under a thicket of warped crimson fungus, then break into whispered plans. As if strategy could be stitched from courage alone, Kellen checks his sword. Mara sharpens an arrow, and Saurai folds the map like a prayer. Their resistance is small, almost quaint against the machinery of a god. But the world teaches that small fires can catch, that single torches have toppled legions when carried by hands that refuse to bow. At dusk the piglins gather, their merchants and warlords drawn to the bastion like moths to forbidden crowns, and the Overlord receives them like a sovereign with a ledger, exchanging authority for gold, souls for structure. This is not only conquest by force but by promise, a covenant of safety for obedience, an economy of dominion where blazes are taxed, ghasts are conscripted, and the rare quartz of the Nether is registered as tithe. And yet in the halls of Tenebris there are murmurs as well, of something older and keener than taxation. The Overlord seeks to rewrite the rules of death itself, to bind Nether spirits into legions that will not waver at dawn. On the second night, the sky above Tenebris roils with a violet aurora, and the Overlord, when he walks among his courtiers, leaves a wake of cooled lava that solidifies into sigils beneath his heels, mapless contracts etched in rock. Within the bastion, a council of uncommon composition meets by torchlight. Piglins in armor, vindicators ill at ease, a single enderman whose eyes burn like polished void, and a peculiar emissary from the end, cloaked and silent, who seems to study the gauntlet as if reading scripture. The emissary speaks rarely, but when he does his words drop like stones into still water. There are echoes of a tyranny beyond where we wandered, he says, a will that arranges stars into cages. He will not be sated with mere obedience. The idea that the Overlord hungers beyond rule finds purchase in their chests like a rotten seed. Even piglins, who count coins with rapt religious fervor, shift their weight nervously at the thought of a sovereign who catalogs souls. Meanwhile, the adventurers become a thorn sharper than they expected. They slip into tunnels, plant obsidian markers in the dark, and collect tales from Nether refugees who remember a peace before the rift was stitched. An elder remains nameless to most, but his story reaches the trio. He was a smith who hammered cold iron with old songs, and he speaks of runes the Overlord cannot break because they are older than conquest, woven into the bones of the Nether itself. You think to press your will upon the world, the elder says, and the world will groan, but it will not always bend. There are locks in the rock and keys hidden in water. He can conquer men, but he cannot trivially unmake the laws that keep death from being a neighbor. It offers them hope like a brittle bridge, a promise that there are limits to any ruler, even one who commands the very temperament of lava. But hope is not a strategy, and the trio know their limitations. They cannot bring down fortresses with arrows alone, nor can they tear contracts written in cooled magma. They must seek allies in the strangest places. They descend into a hollow cavern where soul sand sighs and the air tastes of old prayers there. In a mausoleum of lost portals, they attempt to negotiate with phantoms of the past. Mara offers up the story of the builders of the end, of bridges formed from memory, and the phantoms bend closer like smoke to listen, their empty eyes storing the names of those who once crossed between realms. Saurai lays down his maps and whispers of runes told by the elder, and the spectral forms murmur among themselves like dry leaves, for the lost remember law more keenly than the living do. They give the adventurers a riddle in the weight of an old song, instructions braided into verse. Find the lock beneath the oldest fortress of basalt. Bring water that remembers. The end's cold, and place a shard of the first obsidian at the root. It sounds like a quest spun from bedtime tales, yet the maps tremble beneath Sarai's fingers. They have to cross wastelands where the rifts leak madness, and to steal water from a place where even the night is sharp. They agree with a solemnity that feels like oathcraft, and each of them takes a memento. Kellen straps on a shard of iron that had once belonged to an unknown hero. Mara binds a string of blaze ashes to her bow, and Sarai pockets a sliver of the Elder's runestone. They do not know that across the bastion, the Overlord prepares his own rites. He summons a chorus of bound spirits, and begins the slow choreography of making death obey a ledger, scripting new rules in a language older than grief. This alarms the End emissary, whose silence cracks like frozen glass if he succeeds. He says, even portals will obey contracts, and that means the very paths between realms will be fenced. The stakes darken like sky before a storm. For the first time, Kellen feels the taste of true dread, and he imagines a world where the End is cordoned, and the Overlord collects tolls from souls who wish to travel home. As their tiny rebellion prepares, the Nether shifts its focus outward. Fires that had once leapt aimlessly begin to forge walls, and the skies above ripple with patrols of winged shadows that scout like living compasses. Then the Overlord issues the first decree that tastes of permanence. Any who oppose the bastion shall be branded, and their names will be catalogued in the Ledger of Tenebris, a book that hums like a caged heart. The populace of the Nether, feeling the slow certainty of new law, splits like a stone through water. Some ally for security, others hide, and a scattered few decide to fight, choosing to live as ghosts to keep the bastion from ever enjoying quiet. It is in this dangerous bloom of tension that the trio makes its first decisive move. They erupt from a tunnel beneath a watchtower like a cough from the earth, and in the chaos, they steal the water that remembers the End. The theft ripples outward like a thrown stone. Sentries roar, buttresses slump under the weight of summoned barbs, and the bastion declares the attackers outlaws, a new category that justifies unending pursuit. The trio flees through tunnels lit by bioluminescent fungi, hearts hammering like drums. The water skin heavy in Sarai's pack, they make their way to the ancient lock hidden under basalt, every step echoing prophecy. At the lock, the Elder's runes glow when touched by the stolen water, and it is then that the ground writes back. Fissures bloom, and a hush falls so complete that even the Overlord's distant shout seems muffled by the rock itself. Below them, the lock opens, and a cold wind sings of something massive awakening.